Okay, today we're going to be talking about Augustus Caesar, Emperor and Savior of Rome. Now, through both talent and tenacity, Augustus Caesar transformed a republic into an empire, forging the roles of representative of the people, which is known as Princeps, head of the military, which is Imperator, and the high priest of the Roman public religion, Pontifex Maximus, in such a way as to become a prominent presence in the life of everyone within the empire, forging, of course, as we know, the Imperial Cult, which will raise the status of emperors to that of heroes and, yes, even gods that are worshipped. Now, Augustus also brought the very best poets and artists to Rome so as to make a new golden age, and this golden age all the more glorious, resulting in a new epic known as the Aeneid, written by the court poet by the name of Virgil, grafting on as part of the already famous Iliad and the Odyssey. Augustus did more than change Rome from a city of brick and make it into one of marble. He reinvented the Roman identity while claiming to restore the old order. How did he do it? Well, he said he desired to reestablish the republic. He actually did the very opposite, creating one of the most powerful empires the earth has ever witnessed. So here we go. So I have some help with this talk. Let's see here. So this is my advisor. I'm sure he is not biased in any way. So basically, it's success or bust. Wait, never mind. Sorry, I'm moving this back. But yes, I do have an Augustus statue. I apologize ahead of time. I do use quite a few resources, and I just want to show you. I have a lot more than this, but I just want to show you some really good ones, handy ones. One is called Augustus, the First Emperor of Rome. It's by Adrian Goldsworthy. I have another one that's Augustus and the Creation of the Roman Empire, which is a great one. It has by Ronald Millar of UCLA. Another one, Augustus by Pat Southern. So we got some pretty good books here. The Areopagus, right? And quite a few others, but I also spent a lot of time using primary sources, including Augustus himself in his Res Gestae. So, so we're gonna jump to it. So, the imperial cult rested upon the edifice of the power of the emperor, and of course, as I said before, this power was based upon three main aspects. As we stated before, we have this concept of Princeps, which is representative of the people, and second, the position of head of the military, which is commander in chief, and that word is Imperator, and third, of course, is that a head of the Roman public religion, which is Pontifex Maximus. So we're kind of going to go jump into it. Obviously, it was not common for any one person before not just Augustus, but before, I should say, Julius Caesar, to hold all three powers at once, and rare for political leaders to hold even two of these positions over their entire lifetime. I do want to make it clear that what makes a Roman emperor is a combination of these three powers. That's just basic Roman history 101. So, but during his career, Julius Caesar, of course, obviously prior to Augustus, Julius Caesar did just that. First of all, Julius Caesar was elected to the position of Pontifex Maximus in 63 BCE. Caesar's career was in many ways secured via his ascent to this position. For now, he was constantly in public view in one of the most important offices, both within a religious and a political context. But also, Caesar left an imprint on the commoner, for of his own initiative, as Pontifex Maximus, Julius Caesar, because we're talking about him first, he systematically began to reform the traditional Roman calendar, reforms he would continue when later on he took the full reins of power. Now, so I want to talk about Pontifex Maximus first. That's kind of where we're going to start there. What is Pontifex Maximus? Well, the Pontifex, this was the high priest of the Roman public religion, with the word Pontifex meaning bridge builder, and Maximus meaning, of course, obviously, the greatest. This particular breakdown of the word was mentioned both by Dionysius of Halicarnassus and Marcus Terentius Varro. Because the Tiber River running by Rome was considered quite sacred, an actual deity, in fact, any bridge crossing such a living deity needed to be constructed under the auspices of a sacred rather than a secular official. In fact, a priest, for example. Many theorize that the priest of the bridge over the Tiber quickly became the most important religious official in Rome by reason, of course, of this association. For the Tiber River was important for the commercial success of the city, facilitating river trade and land trade via this bridge. The Tiber also had to be respected, for the god was still unpredictable and could, well, do anything, right? Like flood its banks and drown the Romans living along its banks at its own special will. When translated into Greek, the word selected by Greeks and Romans to best represent the meaning of the word Pontifex Maximus was archeros, or archeros megestos, which literally means the greatest high priest. The Pontifex Maximus transcended. This is all very important. You got to know this, because otherwise nothing's going to make sense. The Pontifex Maximus, he transcended secular law, deemed as ruling under the authority of divine law. As for his duties, they included organizing the rituals and public calendar, which, of course, we already observed Caesar doing under his term, and the public calendar, which we already observed as well. And of course, organizing what's going on in the temples of Rome and so forth, and managing sacred places and enforcing burial laws and ensuring that the dead ancestors get the proper treatment. The manes are honored properly, overseeing family laws. The sublime oracles. I mean, quite a bit. Obviously, this one person can't do it all. So the idea is he is the final say. He's the final arbitrator with many priests below him. But still, it's all part of it. Now, so the word Pontifex Maximus then means head of the Roman public religion. A lot of it connected to specifically Jupiter and Juno and Minerva. Now, I do want to say just a little bit, I want to go a quick rabbit trail. Remember, Pontifex Maximus was used by the Roman emperors, and then, of course, in conjunction to the idea of Princeps, which is, the first citizen representative of the people before the Senate, and, of course, Imperator, which is head of the military. And I just want to say that the other two titles kind of fall apart as time goes on. Representative of the people will disappear, become less and less. By the time we get to Septimius Severus, it's hardly used at all. He doesn't want to use it. He's not really caring about being representative of the people. And so they're kind of now go, okay, we'll just depend on religion, Pontifex Maximus, and military, which of course is Imperator. And then as time goes on, during the 3rd century, every Tom, Dick, and Harry is declaring themselves as Roman emperor through acclamation, Imperator. And by the time we get to the end of the 3rd century, like Diocletian, it's like Imperator is losing its meaning. And so then Pontifex Maximus, head of the Roman religion, becomes one of the most important aspects of a Roman emperor when it comes to the auctoritas, when it comes to their authority. And so I just want to mention that. So the Roman emperors will hold that. And then when, of course, in 476, when the Western Roman Empire falls, the new head of the Roman religion, of course, will be the pontiff, the Pontifex Maximus, who is the Pope. You just woke up. Okay, I got it. I got it. I got it. I got it. Is that good? You guys following already? So yes, you're going to have to listen to all this stuff, or otherwise nothing's going to make sense. Okay, so moving back, perhaps a little bit, Julius Caesar early on became very aware of how important religious beliefs were to these very conservative Romans, and how appealing supernatural ideas were to them. They were he found very superstitious. I could use this. Now, already, of course, he realized that because religion was so deeply ingrained, his own legacy, his own family life could have some bearing. Let's take a look at the very first image. Here we go. So go to the first image here. And it will be of, I believe, Aeneas. The first one here. There it is. Yes, from the Aeneas. So already family tradition carefully recorded via their ancestor cult how Julius Caesar descended from the proud bloodline of Aeneas, whose father was mortal, but whose mother was the goddess Venus. Aeneas, who fled from Troy following the city's conquest by the Greeks, was told by Jupiter that he was destined to found a people, the Romans in Italy, who would later rule the world. This Aeneas did accomplish his mission despite temptations to stay in Carthage with Queen Dido, and so was viewed as one of the founders of the Romans. So to the family of Julius Caesar, the blood of the goddess Venus literally ran in their veins and was passed along via the spirit of these ancestors. The genius that passed from paterfamilias to paterfamilias over the generations. But, go to the next image, but his family also tried to make a connection beyond Aeneas with Ancus Marcius. Ancus Marcius was the 4th and last Latin king of Rome. For those who, there were 7 kings of Rome. The last 3 were Etruscan. So they're claiming connection to this particular Ancus Marcius. And by the way, which is claimed, of course, to reign between 642 to 617. Now, of course, from King Ancus Marcius going backwards, they could easily trace their family back to Romulus himself, who was the son of Mars and who founded the city of Rome itself. Hence, you see in the connection of the family, hence Venus and Mars were both determined as Julius Caesar's divine family ancestors, while Aeneas and Romulus were both considered his half divine heroic family ancestors, with the first, of course, establishing the Romans in Italy, and the second founding the eternal city itself. From their perspective, basically, greatness was clearly in their genes and in their spirit or their genius as well. But let's go to the next image. Caesar was also related to the famed Roman general Marius, who married his Aunt Julia. Marius not only heroically defeated the Teutonic Germans, as well as Ambrones and the Cimbri in battle, but reformed the entire Roman military into a more effective fighting machine. He reorganized the legions into a organized cohort system. While before, owning land was a prerequisite to serving in the military. So in order to serve in the army, you had to own land. What happened is Marius eliminated that restriction so that the landless citizens could now serve, greatly increasing the potential number of soldiers available to fight and defend Rome. The reward for those who did not have land when they went to serve was that they could receive land. This is important. They could receive land from the newly conquered territories when they finally did retire. In this way, Marius was a friend to the commoner. Now part of the family, the powerful Marius selected Caesar to be on the list to attain high office of Flamen Dialis, which was, of course, the priest of Jupiter. When he was only a teenager, the term set to begin in the year 84 BCE. Unfortunately, because Marius died on January 13th, 86 BCE, just 70 days into his 7th consulship, he was not around to secure Caesar's priestly position for very long. And Sulla, the rival Marius, returned to Italy, and Caesar quickly lost his position. But there you have that. So anyway, you can see how now you can take that picture down. Thank you so much. Wonderful. So at his Aunt Julia's funeral in 69 BCE, Caesar proudly boasted about his family's prestigious pedigree. I mean, hello, Mars and Venus, Romulus and the fourth Latin king. I mean, this is looking pretty good. And then, hey, Marius and making everything organized in the military. So this he's using this, but he's also using the traditional conservative religious values of the Romans to greatly embolden his position, even at a young age. And so, yeah, he's at his aunt's funeral. He's boasting about, his family line, telling how Julia came from a line of Roman kings and how she was also connected to the mighty Marius. And sometimes they consider Marius as a refounder of Rome by many at that time. So, yeah, Julius Caesar was elected praetor in 62, which is basically public office, taking care of extrajudicial work. And he's kind of moving up. Okay, so, but then following this post, Julius Caesar was awarded the governorship of Hispania Ulterior. That's, of course, part of Spain, and was able to greatly expand the lands under his supervision through conquest as well as diplomatic negotiation. To his success of doing this, his troops declared Julius Caesar as Imperator. Oh, taking on the next one, right? Seeing this? Imperator. So what is Imperator? It's basically understood as being a magistrate with imperium, and a title given to military commanders during the Roman Republic. This distinction was proclaimed in an honorific manner by loyal troops to their commander after some great military victory, following which a triumph march was expected. And so they would declare, "You are Imperator," also translated as autocrator, meaning one who rules himself. And so presents the idea of power without a rival that was centered about that person. Again, the idea means one who rules himself. This is really, truly self-empowering, right? No wonder the designation Imperator was often only considered valid for the celebrated general until the actual triumph march, because otherwise, and then immediately withdrawn, because you'd think it'd go to their head. You don't want to be Imperator for a long time, would you? Wait, yeah, you can see how that's going to stick with the emperors. Oh, guess what? That's where we get the word emperor from. Imperator. You just figured it out. Okay, so this, of course, is the idea of being, this later will become understood as the idea of being commander in chief of the Roman army, but this will change as time goes on, right? The Senate was impressed by Caesar's victories in Spain and declared he could have his triumph in the capital. However, when he returned to Rome, Caesar wanted to be elected to the consulship and return to his province. But a certain Marcus Porcius Cato, fearing the rise of the power of Caesar, gained other like-minded senators and says, well, you have a choice. You can either get your triumph march or you can run for consulship. Uh, I know all these Roman terms, consulship. What does that mean? Romans always feared any dictatorial power at first during the Republic. By the way, re publica means just simply the people. I always kind of laugh at this because the People's Republic of China is actually redundant. It's the people's people for China. Okay, so it just simply means the people. Okay, and okay, we're gonna so what happens here is that the consuls, what they do is after the reforms, the end of the kings, the last Etruscan king, Tarquinius Superbulus, which is a great name. After they overthrew him, you got Brutus. Brutus was a hero, not the Brutus that was involved in killing Julius Caesar, but this is the early Brutus. He was a hero. They established the Republic. And what they did is they had this great idea. They said, you know what? We have the Senate, okay, and who is in charge over the Senate should not be a leader like a king, like a monarch. It should be a consul. In fact, it should be consul as in two. And so the executive branch were two consuls every year. And after every year, those two consuls were not allowed to run for another office. They both had to step down and could not run again for the next term. This breaks up that power monopoly. However, after that 1 year, they could run again. And so what happens is you have two, in a sense, presidents, right? Two presidents, and they both have to absolutely agree with one another, and they could actually veto each other too. so consulship, that means if Julius Caesar is running for consul, that means there's going to be another person in that position because it's always two. And that's how they kept track of their dates. You know that, right? So because typically there's hardly any situation where the same two consuls are running again. Sometimes there's a few exceptions. So what will happen, so there's the consul, this person and that person, you know exactly what year it is. And that's how we're able to know the years all the way through Roman history, is by knowing who's consul that year, because it's going to be different. And so that's the kind of idea, because they didn't want to have that kind of a monopoly of power, but still, just understand that the consulship is like the executive power. It's like the president, except they have two presidents and they run for one term, for that year. They both have to step down, and then they can't run again until the following year. And usually things change. So it's like one or the other, hardly or none of all. So there you have it. So, well, Julius Caesar, of course, wanted to run for consul, and he's pretty upset by that. And so he just, I guess, I'm not having my triumph march. Well, this kind of goes into the seeds of another problem. Apparently, people are starting to get upset at the Senate for lots of reasons. And I'm going to go back just a little ways, not too far, because I don't want to do that. Too much Roman history. I'm not sure if that's good maybe it is good for the soul. I don't know. But I want to say that what happens is that there were, this will make you kind of mad. So I'm going to go there. So what happened is that you have these reforms, and the conquered lands fell largely into the hands of wealthy elites. Okay, so long story really short is there's this idea that hey, the troops the troops, after they're fighting really hard and doing all this work, and many of them do not have land or have diminished land, and they're looking forward to having a happy life in the end and retirement and plowing their fields, because that's something to look up to. I don't know why. So what happens is they're wishing for land, So as soon as they retire as a Roman soldier and fighting the wars of Rome, they get to get a nice piece of land. Well, what will happen is they do get that piece of land. They're going, oh, great, I got my piece of land. All right. But what happens is that the Senate has something that's called latifundia. So latifundia basically is these large, huge plantation-like estates that use slave labor for agriculture. And so what happens is that these latifundia, because they're using slave labor and cheaper methods, they're able to compete with these farmers and sell their goods at a cheaper price, like Walmart. And so what happens is the small farmer starts to get cheated out. Remember, the latifundia, much of that is the senators who are doing it, the senatorial class. They're the ones who have the latifundia. And so there's various people who fight against this. The famous Gracchi brothers, for example, they sought a solution to the problem of the veterans and the urban poor. Tiberius Gracchus, for example, angered aristocrats and the Senate by proposing land reform. The idea was to limit the amount of conquered land any individual could hold. Those who exceed the limit would lose some of their property, which officials would then allocate to smaller farmers. These reforms were looked at by the conservative and prejudicial senators as both very liberal and dangerous. They were only interested in protecting their own class. So, of course, they assassinated Tiberius Gracchus in the year 132 BCE. The murder of Tiberius Gracchus by the senators initiated an era of political violence. And there's Gaius Gracchus, his brother, demanded further land reform and citizenship for all Italians. The plan was rejected, and Gaius was also murdered by the Senate in 121 BCE. So, and then of course, Gaius Marius recruited landless men into the army and promised land for them. Remember Marius being connected to the family of Julius Caesar? Are you getting this? And so you got revolt because these greedy senators are squeezing out the small farmers with their enormous farms or plantations. And so where do all of these people go? Where do they go? They go into the cities and they become part of the urban poor. Here, they fought the wars of Rome, with dreams of having their own small farm one day. And instead, they end up in a squalid apartment complex that were 4, 5, 6 stories high, with, of course, no plumbing, always burning down, falling apart, and they have no jobs or they can't find good ones. And they're going, this is not what we want. So you see what's going to happen, right? Well, people start becoming angry. And so when various generals say, hey, fight for Rome, you're going to get some land, you're going to get some property, and you can, farm, and they go, and of course their minds go to Rome and seeing people who were promised the same thing, these veterans, and they're on the streets or in these squalid tenements, and they're going, well, wait, can you give us a guarantee on that? Sure, we're going that. And so what's going to happen is that the generals are going, oh, I guess we got a guarantee that when we cut away this land from conquered areas or other places, that a latifundia will not be competition and buy you out. Yeah. So how are we going to do that? And of course, you see where we're going with this. The generals are like, well, we're going to make the Senate obey and respect you. And they say, but what if they don't? And the generals will go, well, I guess we'll just have to kill them. You guys got it? You guys got it? So the generals are become heroes to the people, and the senators are in many ways the villains. Ooh, because the larger government is only looking after their private interest. This is one of the key elements that brings the empire about. You guys know that, right? Oh, it's kind of scary, isn't it? Okay, so just keep on going. I'll walk through that one here. Okay, so what happens now is that where I mean, where am I at? Oh, so Caesar. So from his prestigious rank of consul, Caesar used the network available to him to secure his power base and find allies that would stand against the Senate. Caesar found that ally in a person by the name of Pompey. Pompey the Great, having gained so many territories from Rome in the east, Pompey was now fighting the Senate to provide lands for his troops so they could retire and settle down and farm. Meanwhile, a guy by the name of Marcus Crassus, known for his immense wealth, was constantly battling the tax farmers, overseeing the collection of Roman tributes that were taking advantage of his clients, realizing with Pompey on his side, he would gain enough influence to offset the Senate. They started to go, why don't we form a triumvirate? Why do we form an alliance? All three of us. So hence comes the first triumvirate, right? It will be Pompey, Julius Caesar, and Crassus. Now, a lot of people go, why three? Why do three? Well, guess what? Think about this. In fact, I have even Roman historians ask me this question. Why three? Why not two? Why is three? Remember, you have consuls, there's two per year, right? And of course, obviously, sometimes one of the consuls don't agree with you, and that means nothing goes through. Everything gets vetoed, right? So you want to make sure that in some cases, if you want to push policy, that you get two of those people in your triumvirate to be in charge that year so you can pass through legislation. Is that making sense? But they can't run again the next year. Oh yeah, so what do? You get the third guy. And the third guy becomes a placeholder. Is that making sense? So you have three. I guess they could have done four, but you need at least three. And this is the kind of the agreement. Smart, aren't they? And of course, these are two of them, of course, Roman generals. Crassus is a general too. He loses the shirt. But is this making sense? You guys got this? Okay, so the first triumvirate, the rule of the three men. And of course, Crassus was also known as the richest man in Rome. So it always pays to give tribute to the money. You always got to have your financial backer, right? So one major boon fell Caesar's way, and was his appointment as the governor of Transalpine Gaul. So let's take a look at the next image. So this is, you guys having fun yet? Things are making too much sense. So let's go to the next image there. Oh, wait, stop that. This is Pompey. He does look kind of like a Pompey, doesn't he? He likes himself a lot. You'll see that too. Okay, there he is. That's a good picture. The next one, I love that. That's a great image. All right, there it is. Yes, that's Gaul. Now, Julius Caesar was given this Transalpine Gaul, which by the way is all the way at the bottom. It's all the way by the Italy part right there, way back there in the bottom of the screen there, right? It basically covers the southern strip of France today. He was given that, right? But see the rest of those colors? That's what he conquered. He conquered all of that, right? So he began in 58 BCE. And of course, eventually it was extended all the way to 49 BCE. Transalpine Gaul basically covers quite a bit, as I said. Only the strip of France, the southern part. But what happened is Caesar was very restless, and he knew the lands beyond offered much profit and power and prestige. Caesar was also given jurisdiction over Illyria, which is like Dalmatia, which is an area of Croatia and part of Serbia. It's kind of really off. But anyway, so Caesar decided that he's going to conquer the mountainous lands of Helvetii, which is, of course, Switzerland today. Then he marched further north, defeating the Belgic Confederacy along with the Nervi in 57 BCE, the latter of whom possessed much of northern Belgium today. By 56 BCE, he had reached Amorica, not America, in Brittany and conquered the Veneti. From this land jutting into the North Sea, Caesar made 2 expeditions to Britain, one in 55 and one in 54 BCE. At the Battle of Alesia in 52, he defeated the Gauls. And so basically, France, what is now France, what is now Belgium, and what is now Switzerland, and a part of Germany, you can see right there, to the Rhine there, become part of the Roman Empire. That's a big deal. Plutarch records that Julius Caesar conquered 800 cities, subdued 300 tribes, sold 1 million men into slavery, and slaughtered 3 million in battle. I mean, so much of the time, the first triumvirate were supportive. For example, when both Pompey and Crassus were elected together as consuls in Rome in 55 BCE, because, Caesar's away, they were able to see that Caesar's proconsulship was extended for another 5 years so he could complete his conquest of Rome. Then the next year, Julia, the daughter of Caesar and the wife of Pompey, unfortunately died in childbirth. Now, all of a sudden, they were both in great grief. And that was the security that, unfortunately, they needed. So both men mourned over, of course, Julia, and they became more distant from each other, starting to break up the triumvirate. So the senators, being the way they are, start whispering into Pompey's ear and saying that, hey, you know what? I think Julius Caesar is kind of a threat. He just extended the empire by a third. What are we going to do with this guy? It's going to go to his head. Meanwhile, Crassus was killed fighting in Parthia. So now we got 2. And of course, civil war between Caesar and Pompey was inevitable. And so basically in 50 BCE, the Senate told Caesar he could not run for a second consulship in absentia, and so had to personally stand for election in Rome. They also told him he must disband his army because his second 5-year proconsulship term was completed. Caesar sensed a trap. For if he stepped down, here it is, from his position as general, his men would not receive the lands promised to them for their loyal service, and he would be completely vulnerable to attack by the Senate because the consulship, so basically this is the problem. So in other words, you can see where we're going here. He steps down, his troops suffer because they want to punish his power and prestige, and the senators are thinking, latifundia. We're going to take over and buy all the lands of France. It's going to be ours. We get to cut it all up. Can you imagine? So I think that, I hate to say this, I think Caesar did the right thing to refuse. That's just mean. That's terrible. So they told him, you cannot cross the Rubicon, which is that river that divides up from, of course, Gaul to Italy proper, unless he stands down from his legions. And of course, he crossed over with his legions and was supposed to have said, of course, "Iacta ali est," the die is cast. This is going to happen. So of course, he's heading for the Senate. They all flee. Pompey, he chases Pompey all the way to Brundisium. And to secure Italy, Caesar placed a certain Lepidus as the prefect of Rome, while Mark Antony was placed in charge of the remainder of Italy. After defeating Pompey's army in Spain, Caesar went to Greece to attack Pompey. And there's a famous battle of Pharsalus. And soon after, Caesar did defeat Pompey. But I want to say something. And let's go to the next image because this is where things start to get interesting. After the defeat at Pharsalus, he said he promised he would dedicate a temple of Venus Victrix to her if he won the battle, because obviously he's of the lineage of Venus. Caesar did indeed win the battle, but instead of a temple of Venus Victrix, you see here, he dedicated a temple to Venus Genetrix. Genetrix, yeah, which combined the idea of the goddess as his own personal ancestor and the idea that she was the mother of the Roman people. See how that works? Hence, he was telling the Romans that he was, again, of the blood of Venus, intended to rule over them as his own. Those of the Greek East declare that Julius Caesar was their savior, and we're already calling him a god, a cultural tradition he had already been long familiar with during his days at court in Bithynia as a youth. So, returning to Rome, Julius Caesar received the powers of dictator for 11 days, at which point he received a second term as consul. And of course, Mark Antony also got a promotion as master of the horse. Caesar now headed to Alexandria in pursuit of Pompey. So I guess let's go to the next image. Let's see, we're going here. That's Cleopatra. So let's go there. Inserts. And so what happens is that he chases Pompey, who fled the battle, to Alexandria, and he sought refuge at the court of King Ptolemy the 13th. Now, realizing that he could not fight Caesar, King Ptolemy, and of course, King Ptolemy, his sister, of course, is Cleopatra, who at that point was an exile. They had a little civil war between each other, and so she was out there, and so he's claiming to be the top king and so forth. But he realized, and Pompey was supposed to be his friend. It's supposed to be his ally. That's why Pompey fled to Egypt, to be with him. And so what happened is Pompey panicked, and he beheaded. Sorry, I should say this. Ptolemy panicked, and he beheaded Pompey, cut his head off, and then and he proudly showed the head to Julius Caesar, because after all, they've been battling, they've been fighting each other. And you know what happened? You know what Julius Caesar did? He saw the head of Pompey, and he started to cry. What? That was my friend. What? That was my friend. My daughter was married to him. Are we learning about the Romans? You see, it's business. Right? This still continues on, right? The idea is they may love you, but what happened when it came to the Civil War, that was business. And so he was so angry with Ptolemy that he made an alliance with Cleopatra. That's how it started. That's why it happened in the first place. So what happened is that he with Cleopatra, Caesar and Cleopatra, defeated the hated Ptolemy who killed Pompey. He secured Cleopatra as the sole queen of Egypt. Cleopatra soon became pregnant and bore him a son by the name of Caesarion. And then Cleopatra, by the way, people never want to talk about this. I think this would be a great sitcom. Cleopatra moved to Rome. Did you guys know that? She moved to Rome. She occupied a magnificent estate there. Yeah, and I think it'd be interesting to have like some kind of a mini series or movie on Cleopatra in Rome. How that went over, because according to Roman law, however, marriage was only recognized between two Roman citizens, and Cleopatra was not eligible. Of course, Julius Caesar happened to be also married, a marriage that lasted 14 years, but had no heirs were ever born to them. Only he and Cleopatra. Because Cleopatra was a product of the Hellenistic monarchy, the idea of being worshipped as a goddess was considered, well, business as usual for her. And she had long embraced her title as Cleopatra Thea. Julius Caesar was not unaffected by her influences, for as time went on, he became increasingly willing to permit himself to be likewise venerated with certain qualifications. For the Greeks could do so within reason, but the Romans on Italian soil, not so much. For example, the Senate set up a statute declaring him as a demigod in 46 BCE, but he did have the inscription removed. But things start to go to Julius Caesar's head. All this, by the way, is a precedent for Augustus, as you can see. Caesar left Egypt and went east. He defeated the king Apotheosis. This is where he said, Veni, Vidi, Vici. I came, I saw, I conquered. Actually, the V's are W's, so it'll be Weenie, Weedy, Wiki, but that sounds like Elmer Fudd, so we're not doing that. Meanwhile, despite the fact that Caesar was not in Rome, the Senate continued to bestow honor after honor upon him. So games were commenced in celebration of his great victories, and the official recognized Caesar's right to wear triumphal clothing, the purple robe, and so forth. So we'll go to the next image. I think this image is still here, but it's not a big deal. Yeah, there it is. There's Julius Caesar. He's looking more and more kind of godlike, as you can see. By the way, those eyes were painted, so he didn't have empty eyeballs, but there you have it. And so what happens, though, is that the Senate voted that Caesar could be dictator. Now, remember, a lot of the senators were murdered. And so these are the replacements, and they're a little bit apprehensive. They're wanting to please Caesar as much as possible. He was also, he's given this power for 3 years. One pinnacle moment was when he was declared as Pater Patre, father of the fatherland. And so basically it's I will go into the paterfamilias idea. I just want to mention that just real quickly, not too much, but paterfamilias means head of the family, was always the oldest male within the family, and is believed that when that father or that oldest male died, his genius, yes, his genius, which is vital spirit and potency, actually left his body and was placed upon the next oldest male. So it's that genius that passes down. And of course, the paterfamilias was celebrated at the lares. It was celebrated at the family altar in every house. So sometimes there's an image of a person wearing a toga, or there's a snake. And so that's what happens. And people make offerings to this genius that is this guiding force of each family. Well, now he's claiming that he is the father, the genius, the spirit is in him over all of the Romans. See how that works? So things are changing. Father of the fatherland, the genius, the power, the spirit is upon him. And you can see already the imperial cult is already on its way. So what happens now is something else happened. For Julius Caesar was becoming a religious fixture within the Roman public cult during his absence from Rome. In his honor, the Senate ordered that his image should be carried at all religious processions. Yet this image of Caesar was not an idealized image. Now, with his hair combed forward to cover his bald head in an attempt to make him look more godlike, coins often reserved for Roman gods and religious symbols and men long dead were now pressed with the image of Caesar, the very first living person to appear on a Roman coin. And the living Caesar's image was also positioned on the Capitoline next to the 7 kings of Rome and so forth. In fact, go ahead, and you can't really see it because we got rid of that coin, but I just want to mention, so take the image out. I just want to show you something. You can't really see it, but I just want to show that this is an image of Caesar. It's a silver image. So there he is. Hi, Caesar. And yeah, he's so this was minted during his lifetime. During this time, this was around 48. So that cool. So anyway, but you can't really see it. but there you have it. So no overt was another attempt to establish an image to him with divine implication. There's a statue of Caesar that was housed within the temple of Quirinius, and it was accompanied by an inscription, "To the invincible God." What was this about? So what's happening? Is he's the God, or is it his spirit or genius is a God, or is it a misunderstanding from the sources at that time? But he's already approaching godlike status. He's getting all these titles, and the senators are getting a little bit more, well, of course, upset again. So so what happens is that I want to skip a few sections here. There's quite a bit here. Is that they became more and more irritated with him. He gave himself his own imperium. Julius Caesar decided to overhaul the entire calendar. A reform he first began when he's Pontifex Maximus back in 63 BCE. In 46 BCE, Julius Caesar established what is a 365-day year, and established the idea that there would be an extra day every 4th year. So that becomes official at that time, again in 46 BC. I think it's a good reform, but hey, he had to get some credit. So because the month of Quintilis was the month of his birthday, he changed the name to that month as Julius that same year, which is, of course, July in English. So, of course, his actual birthday was July 12th, and it became a national holiday. So, hey, we got July. So he is getting things done. Now, the Senate continued to become more suspicious, you'd think, of Caesar. And they're afraid that, remember, they worked so hard to get rid of the kings of Rome. They're afraid that he is going to declare himself a monarch. He's going to declare himself Rex, or a king for life. And he's already made himself a dictator. At one point, a diadem appeared on one of his statues on the rostra. When, of course, when Caesar heard this, he outright refused this designation, because people were saying, hey, we think you're trying to destroy the Republic. And he responded, rem publicum sum. He responded, he's not trying to destroy the Republic. He responded, I am the Republic. Oh, that's not good. That's not good. So he's all of a sudden seen himself as the embodiment of the will of the people. I'm not just trying to destroy it. I am that. That's what me. Whatever his true intentions, it was not taken very well. And by the way, this is the beginning, the stirring of the idea of the sense of the idea of first citizen, or Princeps, which Augustus will make more official, the idea being the very embodiment of the people. Somebody just mentioned Palpatine, Emperor Palpatine. Yes, very much. This is shades of George Lucas and Star Wars and the prequels. Absolutely. And that's where he gets it from. That's where it's coming from, right? So then on February 15th, 44 BCE, Caesar sat upon a gilded throne on the rostra, ready for the festivities of Lupercalia to commence. He was wearing a purple robe, a golden laurel on his head, and he had these outlandish red shoes. The crowd was ready for the races, and Mark Antony comes up, and I guess he puts a diadem he kind of puts it over his head, doesn't put it on his head. He hangs it over his head. And maybe they agreed to this. Some people say he did, some people say he didn't. And Mark Antony says, the people offer this, the title of king, to you through me. And they're expecting maybe the crowd to go, yes, yes, yes. So here's Mark Antony. He's holding the diadem, and it's a complete silence. Apparently, that's not what the people want. And of course, very quickly, Caesar says, I will not be king of Rome. Jupiter alone is king of the Romans. To this, the crowd went, started to cheer. It's like, we got to work on that one, Mark. This is not going well. So on the Ides of March 15th, 44 BC, some senators sent word to Caesar that he was to arrive in the forum for the purpose of reading a petition. This is actually the Curia of Pompey, which we have located. Let's take a look at the next image. I think I have a picture of where Julius Caesar was assassinated. This is where Julius Caesar gets killed. All right. So anyways, so he's walking by the theater of Pompey on his way to the forum, and they asked him to step aside to a room adjoining the east portico. As Caesar began to read this petition, which is actually a fake, where it's supposed to instruct him to return the power he claimed for himself back to the Senate. He's trying to read this, and he's trying to read. All of a sudden, Casca lunged at Caesar, thrust down his tunic, and stabbed him directly in the neck. Caesar grabbed Casca's arm, crying, "Villain Casca, what do you do?" Casca then called on the others in Greek, "Help, brothers, adelphoi aboithe." Now the others joined in, cowardly stabbing at the fallen man. Eutropius stated that there were 60 men present to assassinate him. Caesar still tried to fight, but he found it difficult to see because of all the blood that was now covering his face. And eventually he tripped and fell upon these steps that you see here. Looking up, Suetonius says his last words were in Greek and were directed at his best friend. So sad, Brutus, who he saw through the blood. And he says, "Kai su teknon? You too, child?" Of course, this is kind of close to Shakespeare's Et tu, Brute, right? According to Plutarch, when Caesar saw Brutus amongst the others, he said nothing, but pulled his toga over his head and gave up. If his best friend turned against him, why even fight? Very sad, very cowardly too, because they kept stabbing his body. Not once. Everybody wanted to have that symbolic stab. After this terrible deed, Brutus cried out in excitement, "People of Rome, we are once again free." But it was too late for such acclamations to be popular or received. For while the people did not necessarily want a king, they were not too fond of the idea of the Senate either. They felt Caesar represented to them somebody who had their interests at heart. So thank you for showing that picture. That's great. You can see that. And they were not convinced that the Senate really cared for them at all. They felt that the government had betrayed them, and this popular man of the people would help save them during this period of time. And Brutus and Cassius, why do we want to support them? They're part of the very government that's working against us. And so, of course, the Senate's going, okay, we're already established, but something happened that was not expected. And that is the will. You see, what happened is there's this guy by the name of Octavian. And Octavian was the nephew of Julius Caesar. But Julius Caesar adopted Octavian as his son and heir. And so when Julius Caesar died, The 18-year-old believed that whatever Julius Caesar had, which you just heard, he now has. And so he, with two others, Mark Antony and Lepidus, formed the second triumvirate. Octavian determined to celebrate the victory of Julius Caesar and his birthday that July in Rome in the grandest manner possible. But something happens, which is so important. Amidst the celebrations, a comet appeared in the sky. Octavian declared to the people that this comet was in fact the spirit of his father Julius Caesar, and that this was his apotheosis, that he was now ascending to heaven to be a god. Now the seasoned haruspics by the name of Vulcanius looked at this comet too and declared that a poem of the Sibyl from Cumae, the Sibylline oracles, right, foretold this sign as the end of the ninth and the beginning of the 10th age, the last age of humanity and one of peace and prosperity. Yes, indeed, Julius Caesar's apotheosis was interpreted as ushering in a brand new age, the age of gold, so long awaited, but here at last again. This star of Julius Caesar was now found everywhere, whether on coins, on clay seals, and even pressed upon glass beads. Octavian wanted the entire Roman world to know that through his father, Julius Caesar, he was bringing in the new age, and the star of his apotheosis guaranteed that the gods indeed agreed with this idea. So Octavian, so there you have it. So things are changing, right? You have this declaration. You see where things are going to go, right? So let's go to the next image. Yeah, there he is. Hey, there he is at the time. All right, so Octavian, there it is. He had a very lucky horoscope from the standpoint of the Romans born shortly before sunrise on September 23rd, 63 BCE. According to Suetonius, the moment the astrologer Publidius Fugulus heard the time at which the infant Octavian was born, he declared, "The ruler of the world is now born." When Octavius was born, the fortunate waxing natal moon was in a perfect position. Later, when the astrologer Theognis from the city of Apollonia, located along the Via Egnatia, heard Octavian's birth date, he sprang up and threw himself at his feet. From that time on, Augustus had such faith in his destiny, that he made his horoscope public and issued silver coins stamped with the sign of the constellation under which he was born. Wow. So he was born, of course, just before sunrise, and in fact, in the Palatine Quarter, in a small room that was like a pantry, that was oftentimes became a tourist attraction. People used to want to go visit it, and what happened though is that this particular birth became an epic birth as soon as Octavian took power, and of course later it became Augustus. So let's go to the next image. Ah, yes. And so this is the famous Prini calendar inscription. And I want you to see this for yourself. This is the inscription. It dates from 9 BCE. Now, when I say 9 BCE, of course, many believe, I'll just refer to this, that if you're wondering about the time of the birth of Christ, the projected or believed or perceived date, that would between 8 to around 6 BCE. Because, they have, obviously, Herod died in 4 BCE, and you have, supposedly 2 years He was in Egypt. Jesus was in Egypt. So that's a date. So this means that this is before the birth of Jesus. I want you to read this inscription here with me. It says, "It seemed good to the Greeks of Asia," that being Asia Minor, "in the opinion of the high priest Apollonius of Menephilius Azantius, since Providence, which has ordered all things and is deeply interested in our life, has set in most perfect order by giving us Augustus," you can see that tone, Sebasto, the revered one, "whom she," of course referring to Providence, "filled with virtue, that he might benefit humankind, sending him as a savior." So, see sotera, see that word, sotera, "both for us and for our descendants, that he might end," and let's go to the next one. Oh, well, it cuts off. "End war and arrange all things. And since he, Caesar, by his appearance," and of course, you said Epiphanes, by his epiphany, "excelled even our anticipations," right? You see that there, right? Uh, uh, and surpassing all previous benefactors, and not even leaving to posterity any hope of surpassing what he has done. And since the birthday of the god Augustus was the beginning of the good news. Yes, we translate that in the Bible as gospel for the world, that came by reason of him, which Asia resolved in Smyrna. So you have this idea that happens pretty quickly, that Augustus Caesar has come into the world as a savior, and this will be placed on the coinage right away at this time. Okay, let's go to the next image, just so you can kind of, there it is. And of course, I have highlighted the reference to the good news there in Greek. Let's go to the next one. I got a closer up of it so you can see it for yourself. There it is. Pretty interesting, huh? So the Imperial Cult now has brought about Augustus as this savior figure who has come into the world to basically save humanity from conflict and war and so forth. Is this interesting? I don't know. Maybe, right? And this is, like I said, everywhere on the coinage. So let's go to the next image. I'm not sure if that image is still there. Okay. Okay, this is Mark Antony. We'll get there, so take that down. That's good. We'll get there in a few moments. So Octavian, of course, what about him? So he advances through the ranks as he grows up. We won't go into his entire background. I just mentioned that Julius Caesar was very impressed with him, even though he was sickly at times. He even traveled with Julius Caesar through thick and thin, even in areas of battle and conflict and other cases. So there you have that. And so what happens is that I actually, we'll skip this part. So he's going to go against Mark Antony and Cassius to avenge the murder of now his father. And so basically that's what happens. In 43 BC, Octavian and Antony agreed to sharing power. They, along with Lepidus, who was Pontifex Maximus, are basically become the second triumvirate for the next 5 years. They defeat Brutus and Cassius at Philippi in 42. And of course, Brutus' head is cut off and cast at the feet of Caesar's statue. There you have it. So what happened, though, is something else. Is by 42 BCE, Caesar was formally deified as the divine Julius. And by the official action of now the Senate. This is important too. Let's go back to the screen again. I do want to show you something. I guess we did mention Mark Antony in passing, so we can look at his mug for a few seconds. Hey, there's Mark. Hi, Mark. We'll see more of him next. Let's go to the next one. Yeah, let's go there. That's not prominent enough. Okay, so what happens, and you see there, Divius Iulius, right? So basically, of course, this is the divine Julius, right? So by an official action of the Senate, Julius Caesar is now considered a god, and Octavian was soon to become known as the Divus Filius, or son of God. Now, Octavian was not reluctant about using this designation. Let's go to the next one so you can see a little bit more. Yeah, there you go. Not, and so, in fact, of course, now Octavian, through his divine father, as son of God, was to commence the new age. So his perceived supernatural power via the gods were basically brought about immediate credibility, especially to the rather superstitious Romans. Also, the fuller form of Divi Iulius Filius, or son of the divine Julius, was also applied. And this is on the coinage. So this is 42 BCE. So if you're just handling money, everybody knows. Everybody knows the star. Just remember seeing the star. Oh, look, there's a star there on the temple. Everybody knows that this is the apotheosis star, right? That made Julius Caesar a god. And they all know that Augustus or his Octavian still at this time, will declare himself as the son of God. This is common knowledge. You can't do this and handle money and not know. Does that make sense? If you're handling the money, you know for a fact that this is the way things are. So again, public knowledge, it's there, right? So the temple of the divine Julius Caesar was located on the east side of the main square of the forum, upon the precise spot where Caesar was cremated. The temple was placed upon a high platform that also served as a rostrum. The beaks of those ships defeated at the Battle of Actium decorated this temple. In many ways, this temple was dedicated to the comet that appeared. You can see that there, that appeared to represent Caesar's apotheosis and the ushering in of this new age as the man himself. Pliny the Elder notes, the only place in the whole world where a comet is the object of worship is a temple at Rome. His late Majesty Augustus had deemed this comet very propitious to himself, as it had appeared not long after the decease of his father Caesar. People believed that this star signified the soul of Caesar received amongst the spirits of the immortal God. So again, this is really a big deal. This is the beginning of the Imperial Cult. So there you have that, right? Is this interesting, right? So, by the way, by 40 BC, the cult dedicated to the divine Julius Caesar became more organized enough to have a new high priest. For Mark Antony was now elected as the official flamen of the Divus Iulius. So Mark Antony is the guy that's in charge of the cult. Almost immediately, the cult of the divine Julius Caesar spread to the Greek East, with the one very prominent center also established at Corinth. So the Son of God, Octavian, was now expected to bring about universal peace and the golden age. Let's go to the next image. I think we're yeah, yeah, yeah. That is the temple was finished by 36 BCE. This is what's left of it. It's not much. So what did it look like? Let's take a look at the next image. It was pretty. so, so times were pretty rough for that. Let's go to the next image. Okay, so put that down temporarily, but we'll put that up in a few seconds. That's Tarsus. So, but what about Mark Antony? To the Romans, Antony was bound together with this prosperous fate of Octavian via his marriage to his half-sister, Octavia. Many Romans believed that the hoped-for male envisioned to be born to Mark Antony and Octavia would carry on this divine line. At the time, Virgil in his Eclogue proclaimed of this son, so we have the poets involved, and in your consulship, Pollio, yes, yours, shall this glorious age begin, and the mighty months commence their march under your sway. Any lingering traces of our guilt shall become void, and release the earth from its continual dread. He shall have the gift of divine life, shall see heroes commingled with gods, and shall himself be seen by them, and shall rule the world to which his father's prowess brought peace. Wow. So this will be a great, great son. This son will almost immediately create prosperity and abundance, as, quote again, goats will bring home their udders swollen with milk, and the cattle will not fear huge lions. In fact, it goes on that the serpent too will perish, and perish will the plants that hide its poison. Assyrian spice will spring up on every soil. Wow. I mean, this is just a great age. It's a happy age. This new age, ushered in by this son of a divine line through Octavian, is depicted as providing more than ending conflict between men, but invigorating and transforming the entire natural order. This peace is universal. It's going to be universal according to Virgil, who says, see how the world bows with its massive dome, as the earth and expanse of the sea and the heaven's depth, along with all things, rejoice at the age that is at hand. We're at the golden age. This is great, right? Well, so what happens? Do we get a great golden age? Let's go back to Mark Antony. Mark Antony, of course, married to half sister Octavia. So let's take a look at the image here. I'll show it to you. This is Tarsus. Yeah, I've been here. So this is modern day Turkey, and so this is known as Cleopatra's Gate because it's by the port. But who knows? It's been heavily rebuilt during the Byzantine period and other alterations. It may or may not be the one she passed through. But what happened is that Mark Antony is going to see, hey, is everybody loyal to our new order? The order, of course, of Octavian and Lepidus and himself. And he's going to meet Cleopatra to make sure that she's, she submits to this new realm. Oh, yeah, well. So, so he arrives at Tarsus. You see where this is going, right? And turned out that Plutarch writes, judging by the proofs which she had before this of the effect of her beauty upon Caius Caesar and Gnaeus, the son of Pompey, she had hopes that she would more easily bring Antony to her feet. For Caesar and Pompey had known her when she was still a girl and inexperienced in affairs. But she was going to visit Antony at the very time when women have the most brilliant beauty and are at the height of intellectual power. In fact, at one point, Plutarch states that she was a woman, quote, who was haughty and astonishingly proud in the matter of beauty. And so he continues, Cleopatra arrived in style on a barge with gilded sterns and purple sails and silver oars. The boat was sailed by her maids, who were dressed as sea nymphs. Cleopatra herself was dressed as Venus, the goddess of love. She reclined under a gold canopy. Let's go to the next image. Gold canopy, fanned by boys in Cupid costumes. So there you have it. Yeah. It's a modern, more 19th century version of it, right? Now, of course, I'm actually quoting from ancient times. This is pretty sad. Antony, this is what they say, Antony, an unsophisticated, pleasure-loving man, was impressed by this blatant display of luxury, as Cleopatra had intended. And guess what happens? He forgets everything. So it's, so wait, wasn't he married to Octavian's half sister, Octavia? Yeah. Wait, this is not good, is it? No. So now Cleopatra said we're going to have the first dinner aboard her barge, as Plutarch notes. At once, then, wishing to display um, his complacency and friendly feelings, Antony went and obeyed. Of course, Antony missed the point, for by letting her serve the first meal, he made her into the superior in status. But then again, he was never much of a diplomat. Cleopatra entertained him on her barge that night, and immediately he was in awe of lights that she strung about the tree branches over his head, which looked like constellations, which also refracted various shapes and images of light all around, creating, as Plutarch adds, a spectacle that has seldom been equaled in beauty. She also prepared 12 banquet rooms within which were 36 couches made of the richest materials and with purple tapestries hung all around. All the vessels were made of gold encrusted with fine gems. Antony was in awe. Cleopatra smiled and said that, well, she was in a hurry, but would do better next time. And added, as stated by Plutarch, that all these objects were a gift to him, and invited him to come and dine with him again on the next day, along with his friends and commanders. You see where this is going. The next day, Antony invited her to supper, hoping to outdo her, and the second day, he did a terrible job. Can't even match Cleopatra. So he joked about in a good natured and vulgar way, and he starts telling bad jokes. And you think that, Cleopatra would be looked down upon it. She all of a sudden did the bad jokes too, back. It turned out they had the same bad, vulgar sense of humor and were just laughing together. Uh-oh. And so Plutarch writes, he says that when were Antony serious or disposed to mirth, she had any moment saw some new delight or charm to meet his wishes. At every turn, she was upon him and let him escape her neither by day nor night. She played at dice with him, drank with him, hunted with him, and when he exercised in arms, she was there to see. At night, she would go rambling with him to disturb and torment people at their doors and windows, dressed like a servant woman. For Antony also went in the servant's disguise. So basically, to go and doing ding dong ditchum around Alexandria. However, the Alexandrians in general liked it all well enough and joined the good natured, humorly, and kindly frolic and play. And they with fishing together, they had a whole bunch of fun. So we'll take down this image, but it's a great image there. But Mark Antony also began to resent Octavian, who appeared to be successful at everything he did. And Portents also confirmed Octavian's continued success as well as his lack thereof. In fact, Plutarch said, and in any state, affair, and matter of consequence, they both behaved themselves with much consideration and friendliness for each other. But it annoyed Antony that in all their amusements, on any trial of skill or fortune, Caesar should be constantly victorious. He had with him, an Egyptian diviner, one of those calculate nativities, who either to make his court to Cleopatra or that by the rules of his art he found to be so, openly declared to him that though the fortune that attended him was bright and glorious, yet it was overshadowed by Caesar's, and advised him to keep himself as far distant as he could from that young man. For your genius, said he, dreads his. Remember the genius aspect of paterfamilias. So your genius dreads his. When absent from yours is proud and brave, but in his presence unmanly and dejected. So yeah. So meanwhile, At this time, of course, Octavian is doing his thing. Octavian, 39 BC, Julia, Octavian's daughter, was born. A few days later, Octavian divorces her mother, Scribonia, and marries, of course, Livia Drusilla, or Drusilla. We may have an image of her. I'm not sure. We'll put it up. If not, she comes later. Livia, see his wife. Oh yeah. Okay. So there we have Julia, the elder. That's good. Let's go to the next one. Let's see if Olivia there next. Oh, this is really sad. I do want to stop here. Okay, so sorry, that last image, I made a mistake. Last image, sorry, was Octavia. They do have the same hairdo. That's why. Yeah, that's Octavia. So let's go down to the next one. The coin. This is really sad. This is a profile of Antony and Octavia together side by side, minted on the coin. You see their profiles there. Yeah. What's sad about this is, of course, he's cheating on her at this time. So, so there you go. Let's go to the next image. Can't make this up. There it is. Yeah, there's his new Octavian's new wife, Livia, and she is dressed as the goddess Ceres. I thought that was kind of cool. Want to make sure you see that. So he's supposedly marrying up in the world. That's what's going on. Okay, I just wanted to show you that image. So Livia Drusilla was a member of the Roman aristocracy. She only recently divorced her husband and was pregnant with her second son, leading to the presumption that they had, of course, a relationship already. Now, of course, the oldest son by her previous husband, his name is Tiberius. Livia's son is Tiberius. And of course, that will become the next emperor. That's why we need to know that. The younger son, whose parentage is not so sure, his name is Drusus. Okay, so that could be Octavian's son. We don't know. They're having the affair. So anyway, so Octavian, and Mark Antony are kind of going through some problems just a little bit. Mark Antony decides he's going to swear off Cleopatra and he's going to be good, and then he just kind of falls into temptation. He's off fighting in Parthia. He's out there in Syria, and he's going to be going into the Middle East, making these conquests. And then what happens? He can't resist, and he starts fighting Cleopatra with him. So yeah. Meanwhile, who's filling the vacuum of power? It of course will become Augustus' best friend. His name is Agrippa, which we'll talk about soon. Right. So when Antony concluded his campaign, he decided to be with Cleopatra and moved permanently to Alexandria. In 36 BC, Antony even married her. Yeah. So soon, Antony and Cleopatra, they had a son together. So that's not good. Ptolemy Philadelphus. Yeah. As to be expected, the reaction to Antony's marriage with Cleopatra, which, by the way, was celebrated all throughout Alexandria. Everybody is out, the pageantry and everything else going on there. Yeah, what about Octavia? So bigamous husband there. You seeing what's going on here? Okay, I'll tell you what's going on. So let's go back to the fact that these are Romans, and family is everything. Everything. Now, Octavian gave his half sister, who he really cared for, in marriage, right? In marriage to Mark Antony. You get where I'm going. And now he has the audacity of marrying another woman in front of the whole entire world. There's something between brothers and sisters. Brother is Mad, wouldn't you be in his position? So you're making my sister look bad. Meanwhile, Octavia remains loyal to her bigamous husband. She decided to visit Antony. And when she reached Athens, she received a letter from him saying that he would meet her there. However, according to the primary source, right, according to Plutarch, Cleopatra was determined to keep Antony away from his other wife. And she cried and she fainted and starved herself and got her way. Plutarch writes, she therefore pretended to be passionately in love with Antony herself and reduced her body to a slender diet. She put on a look of rapture when Antony drew near, and one of faintness and melancholy when he went away. She would contrive to be often seen in tears, and then would quickly wipe the tears away and try to hide them as if she would not have Antony notice them. And she practiced these arts while Antony was intending to go from Syria to join the Mede. Her flatterers too also says, hey, why do you want to be with Octavia? That's all about duty when Cleopatra truly loves you. So she stamped her feet, said, no, you stay. And guess what? Mark Antony stayed. Oh, no. Antony canceled his trip, and Octavia returned home without seeing her husband. People were pretty upset. In fact, as for Octavia, she was thought to have been treated with scorn. And when she came back from Athens, Caesar ordered her to dwell in her own house. Right? Well, guess what? According to this, of course, she decided no. She's going to dwell in her husband's house, just as if he were at home, and she cared for his children, and not only those whom she is of herself, but also those whom his previous wife had born. And she says, I'm going to be good. I'm going to take care of the household, and I'm going to be faithful. But that made Mark Antony look even worse, because here he is celebrating his marriage, and they're declaring themselves, Cleopatra is Isis, and Mark Antony is Dionysus, and they're dressing up in these outfits. Do you think there's going to be a war? What do you think? Yeah, so of course you can understand what happens. Then of course the other part is that worst of all, in 34 BC, Antony made Alexander Helios the king of Armenia, Cleopatra Selene the queen of Cyrenaica and Crete, and Ptolemy Philadelphus the king of Syria. He's declaring her kids and his kid as head of these regions. So, of course, long story short, then in 32 BC, Antony actually divorced Octavia. And Octavia revealed that Antony's will called for the granting of Roman territory in the east to the children of Cleopatra. Furthermore, it revealed plans for transferring the capital of the empire from Rome to Alexandria. Of course, how much is this? Is of course, propaganda or not, right? The sympathy and allegiance of the Roman public fell, of course, with Octavia and, of course, brother Octavian against Antony. But what's interesting is that Octavian tried to demonstrate to the Senate that Mark Antony was not himself, that he was mentally not balanced. What I think is fascinating, he went through this whole thing, and so he was misguided. He was confused by Cleopatra and her power, power persuasion. And so what happened is that Antony decided to bring his forces to the western side of Greece. Cleopatra accompanied him. Octavian sent a military expedition under the commander of Agrippa to challenge Antony's control of Greece. Octavian later joined Agrippa and their fleet, bottled up Antony and Cleopatra. And so there was a battle, right? But what happened, though, I do want to mention this, is before this, because I want to kind of skip a few sections here because it's all interesting. But I want to mention something. Is before the great battle of Actium, and we know that Mark Antony is going to be beat and Cleopatra. What happened before that is rather than prepare, they went to Ephesus. They had a great celebration as Isis and Dionysus. They crossed over to the island of Samos, and they had a humongous party. Invited all the poets, all musicians, and they partied hard for day in and day out. They just did not stop. And, I do have to say that this really doesn't look very good. Because where is all this money coming from? They're just spending away. So I just want to kind of mention that. So they had this big old party. Then, of course, what will happen is that they're defeated. Let's go to the image here. I have a map of the battle, and you'll see what happens. There it is. Now we take a look at this, and yes, of course, the blue, that is this Mark Antony, the red, those are the forces of Octavian, and but if you take a look, it looks like that they have a very defensible position. It looks, and it is. And so the battle, even though they get frustrated, Cleopatra gets frustrated with the cumbersome ships that Antony is using and employing. It really is a draw. It really is a draw for the most part. And so the battle is going on. They're going back and forth. But what happened is that Cleopatra decides that she is going to cut loose and leave. And he is heading up the battle because he's the big general over the others, as you see here. And you know what he does? He follows her in the middle of battle and leaves the battle. That's how he loses. It could have been a win. And he goes back to Egypt following her, and he goes on her ship. He's all dejected and upset. And in fact, for many days, he sits alone, and she goes to her palace, and he's just brooding. And then, of course, after the battle, is over, and his forces lose, they, and of course, many of them withdraw to Alexandria, and Octavian's vessels follow after. You know what happens? What happens is now we're going to have one big battle at Alexandria, right? And what happens is that as soon as Octavian's fleet arrives, his men put up their oars and they join the forces of Octavian. Now he knows he's really in for it. And so, and he says, this is all Cleopatra's fault. Of course, So what he does is Cleopatra, of course, runs away, as you would expect, right? She runs away because, he's blaming her for everything. And then what happens is that even his cavalry deserted him. And so I'm reading the primary source here. And so there's a rumor that's spreading that Cleopatra is dead. Who spread it? Probably her. And all of a sudden, he gets really sad. And he says, he believes a rumor. And Antony cries out. He says, "Now, Antony, why delay longer? Fate has snatched away your only reason for living." Yeah, I know. A little earlier, he's blaming her, but he does love her. He went to his room and opened his coat, exclaiming that he would soon be with Cleopatra. He ordered a servant named Eros to kill him, but Eros killed himself instead. "Well done, Eros," Antony said. "You showed your master how to do what you didn't have the heart to do yourself." So Antony then stabbed himself in the stomach, but not very well, and passed out on the couch. When he woke up, he begged his servants to put him out of his misery, but they all ran away. It's a really sad end for Mark Antony, right? At last, Cleopatra's secretary came and told him Cleopatra wanted to see him. Overjoyed to hear Cleopatra was alive, Antony had himself carried to her mausoleum. Cleopatra was afraid to open the door because of the approach of Octavian's army, so she had two of her servant women led him up through ropes to the window. Distraught, Cleopatra laid Antony on her bed and beat her breasts, calling him Lord, husband, and emperor. And what's the last words of Antony? They must be great, right? Antony told her not to pity him, but to remember that we had some good times. You just can't make this up. And then he died, unquote. So then ends Mark Antony. Meanwhile, Cleopatra, of course, being a little bit more shrewd, had everything all planned out. And so Octavian was worried because he didn't want Cleopatra to be killed. He didn't want her to be killed. He wanted her to live, to retire to a villa and have her be part of his triumph march. So basically, Octavian is spending much of his time trying to keep her alive. And so she's like, don't worry, I don't want to kill myself. I don't want to kill myself. And he kind of gets a little confidence there. And but then she goes into a chamber, and there are some figs that are brought to her chamber. And she writes a letter and seals it and sends it to Octavian. He opens it and finds Cleopatra's plea that he would allow her to be buried in Antony's tomb. And right away he's going, oh no, oh no. And so they race there, and it's too late. She died. Some say that they found two like little pinpricks on her, and so some people say that she was bitten by an asp, but we don't know for sure. So, but Cleopatra did actually earn Octavian's respect. But Caesar, I'm again reading, although vexed at the death of the woman, admired her lofty spirit, and he gave orders that her body should be buried with that of Antony in splendid and regal fashion. Her women also received honorable interment by his orders. I guess we could take the picture down, but that's good. And where are we? Okay, yeah, interment by his orders. When Cleopatra died, she was 40 years of age, save one, and had shared her power with Antony more than 14. Antony was 56 years of age, according to some, according to others, 53. Now the statues of Antony were torn down, but those of Cleopatra were left standing because Archippus, one of her friends, gave Caesar 2,000 talents in order that they might not suffer the same fate as Antony. And so, as a result, Octavian has control of the entire Roman world. Well, you can see where this is going, right? So what happens now is he makes changes to the military, to the army. He makes it more organized. He made severe penalties for centurions who would leave their post. If you leave your post as a centurion, it is a death penalty. For deserters, also, it is also the death penalty, right? And in the middle of this, we got old Judea. So meanwhile, what's going on with Judea? Remember Herod? Yeah, Herod the Great. Oh, Herod. Okay, so Herod at this point is alive and well. And what happened is there's civil war in Judea going on at this time. And so I just want to say that that Pompey was the one who conquered Judea. And there happened to be conflicts at that time between two claimants for the throne. Pompey kind of did a mistake. He entered the Holy of Holies, and amazed to find only emptiness there, but he desecrated it. And according to what's called the Psalms of Solomon, not to be confused with anything else, this was the first Jewish writing to show the complete hostility to Rome for this act. And the author expresses with ardent expectations that there needs to be a righteous Davidic king Messiah who would deliver the Holy Land from their unholy enemies. So that happened. Pompey then confirms Hyrcanus as the high priest. But even though there were kings of Judea before this period of time, he does not give the title of king to Hyrcanus. And then, of course, he does cut away a section of Judea. He makes it called the Decapolis, or the 10 cities, which are Greek cities. And then Pompey also carries many Jewish slaves to Rome. There's, of course, various other conflicts, which we won't go into. But in the middle of all this, there is somebody who is backing the Hyrcanus, and his name is Antipater. And Antipater has two sons. One is Faisal, and the other is Herod. Now, Antipater, he comes from an Arab background. So, but they follow the Jewish belief system. So I want you to understand that the Herod is Edomian. He is an Edomite. Is this cool? I don't know. But yeah, but what happens is Antipater is poisoned in 43 BCE. And so Mark Antony at this time made Faisal and Herod as leaders. And then, of course, there's a Parthian invasion, and they imprison Faisal, the older son, and what happens is that to prevent, he didn't want to be tortured, so Faisal actually, with his hands shackled, dashed his own brains against the stone. So that ends Faisal. No more Faisal. He got phased out. So what happens instead, of course, is Herod is left. So meanwhile, Hyrcanus also was imprisoned, and Antigonus bit off his ear so that way he'd be defiled. So there's no, because according to, high priest can't be defiled. It's a big mess. So where are we going with this? Herod flees to Rome. It's Herod the Great. He flees to Rome, and he is declared by the Senate in the year 40 BCE as king of the Jews. You see that? He's a friend and ally of the Roman people. He's also declared. He's bound to carry out the will of Rome. And he was, I am loyal to Mark Antony. Mark Antony is my man. I follow him to the end. Hey, who won that battle? Did Mark Antony win that battle? No. Who won that battle? Octavian. So all the friends and allies of Mark Antony, they flee. They all run away. They all do it except for Herod. Herod goes right to Octavian. Wow. And he told Octavian, he says, I would have beat you. I would have defeated you. You can see probably Octavian is probably going kind of like, maybe the soldiers are kind of crowding in. I would have defeated you until the end because I had absolute and complete loyalty to Mark Antony. The fight to the very end. And it is that loyalty that I now give to you. Octavian, you are still king of the Jews. That's bold. That is bold. That's gutsy. Kind of clever. Faithful friend. And so remember, he's Jewish. So where are we going with this? Let's go to the next image. And you'll be like, what? So, of course, Herod, he builds up the port called Caesarea Maritima. He fixes it all up. He constructs the whole city of white stone. It's crowned with a temple dedicated to Rome and Augustus. Wait, I thought he's Jewish. Why is he dedicated to the goddess Rome and the god Augustus? Yeah, he built a theater, an amphitheater. The temple, by the way, platform, let's go to the next image, was discovered in 1989, but they just found it. So this temple had been torn down around 400. It was replaced by an octagonal Byzantine church around the 6th century. It was 95 by 150 feet, and 100 feet from the column base to the peak. It was made of local sandstone, but it also is covered by marble facing. Take this image right down real quick, and I'll show you something. And here's a piece of it. A piece of it as signed by the archaeologist George Jacomacus. So this is an actual piece of the temple that was dedicated to Augustus as well as Rome, the divine Augustus. I want to tell you ahead of time, this is legal. He worked for it was given as a gift by the Israeli government, and it was given then to my dad and then to me. So it's all legal, don't worry. But yeah, this is an actual piece of it. So you're seeing it right here. It's kind of cool because as I was putting together this talk, I was using it as a paperweight for my paper. It's like, you can't make this up. Yeah, so and I'm writing about the temple of the divine Augustus and Rome with a piece of the temple, the divine Augustus of Rome, holding down the page. So that's how you can't make this up. Okay. So the next image, also, I go to the next image here. Also, yes, this is the temple, what it looked like in Caesarea Maritima. Pretty big. Wow, that's a huge temple. Herod the Great, the Jewish leader, right? Yeah. Okay. Let's go to the next image. He decided to make another. This is my photograph, by the way. Another temple dedicated to Augustus at a place called Sebaste, built in 27 BCE. At first, but staircase, you can see it's pretty monumental. The temple was destroyed but rebuilt by Septimius Severus, so this is pretty impressive. Let's go to the next image. Yeah, he built a third temple at Caesarea Philippi, dedicated to the divine Augustus. Are you guys seeing the pattern here? Right. Let's go to the next image, and that's what it looked like in back then. So I do want to make it clear that Herod is pretty loyal to Augustus, right? So, okay, take down the image. But Herod the Great, he's not exactly a great guy, which just kind of sum him up a little bit. He married a Hasmonean princess, a granddaughter of both Hyrcanus II and Aristobulus II. She was known as the most beautiful woman in Jerusalem, and they seemed to have a strong affection together. Eventually, he killed her when his mind was poisoned by her sister. That was followed by the marriages. Herod, after that, he married Doris, and that. Miriam II killed her. Malthace killed her. Another Cleopatra, she's over. Pallas, that's over, killed. Phaedra killed Elpis, even an unnamed cousin, actually unnamed niece and an unnamed cousin. And so he went through wives quite a bit. Herod was also extremely jealous of his position. In fact, Augustus said, knowing Herod's conduct and the Jewish scruples about pork, Augustus said that he would rather be Herod's pig than one of Herod's sons. So you get that idea, because he did kill his sons too. He killed mom as well. Yeah, so there he had it. So when people say that there's no way that he could have killed infants, I'm thinking, well, there you have it. Oh, wow. Raina said that George Jacomacus signed off on my master's thesis with Charles Frazee. Yeah, by the way, I worked both with Charles Frazee and George Jacomacus. So now you know who signed that. Very good. So, of course, eventually Herod's health did decline. In fact, I'll read a little bit here, and you'll see why I'm talking about it. Herod's health now declined. This is from Josephus. Age and grief increased his ailments, for he was almost about 70 years old, and he was now further distressed by an uprising against him. Judas and Matthias, two educated doctors of the law, incited a band of young men to tear down a large golden eagle which Herod had placed above the gate of the temple. Well, yeah, this was put there in defiance of Jewish law, which forbade the image of any living thing to be introduced into the temple. The men were arrested in the act and brought before Herod, who ordered the ringleaders to be burnt alive. And the same night, there was an eclipse of the moon. After this, Herod grew rapidly worse and suffered horrible torments. He had terrible cravings to scratch himself. His bowels were ulcerated and his privates gangrenous and wormy. He tried in vain to relieve his gasping and convulsions in the warm springs at Kelero and returned to Jericho. Here he assembled the men of distinction from all parts of the nation and ordered them shut inside the hippodrome. He told his sister Salome that as soon as he died, all these men were to be killed so that there would be grief throughout the country at his death rather than joy. Nice guy. I mean, really quality individual. Then, of course, he also killed his son in the middle of that. He did eventually die, and he divided up Judea. So why are you talking about his death? That was in 4 BCE. So of course, according to Christian perspectives, you have, remember, Herod died 2 years after the birth of Jesus, according to that reckoning. So that means that everything I talked about when it came to the imperial cult, all those ideas were all earlier. Is that making sense? The idea of Savior, the idea of Son of God, the idea of changing the entire world. Is this helpful? Yeah, so you can see how interesting that is. Okay, so other things, other bits and pieces. I know we don't have a lot of time, but I want to say a few more things. I think we're doing pretty good, though. Let's go to some more images. Yeah, it's a good picture of him. So, of course, a little bit more about him, just here and there. He did fight against bribery. He was a true friend to so many. Unfortunately, he was not exactly dedicated to his marriage with Livia. In fact, one time he took the wife of an ex-consul from her husband's dining room before his very eyes and placed her into his bedchamber and bringing her back to the table with her hair disheveled and her ears glowing, according to a primary source. So, yeah, he wasn't. He also liked to have a lot of gossip about his big banquets. One was a private dinner that he would used to have. It's called the 12 Gods, where everybody shows up as gods and goddesses. There will be 6 men and 6 women. And of course, I won't have to tell you what occurred at those festivities. But the ambrosia was running, frothing over, I guess is the best way to put it. There, and it got so bad that Livia even brought him women to be with. So, yeah. So, and at the same time, he was all for people being faithful in marriage and making sure that they do get married, because we need more Romans, right? So there you have that. So other than the dinner parties, he was a light eater. I'm not sure if you want to know what he ate, but hey, why not, right? He ate plain food. He liked coarse bread, small fishes, handmade moist cheese, and green figs. So yeah, so we have letters. He said, one says, I ate a little bread and some dates in my carriage. And again, he says, as I was on my homeward way from Regia in my litter, I devoured an ounce of bread and a few berries from a cluster of hard fleshed grapes. He says, another point, he says, not even a Jew, my dear Tiberius, fast scrupulously on his Sabbaths as I have today. For it was not until after the first hour of the night, and I ate 2 mouthfuls of bread in the bath before I began to be anointed. He didn't drink that much wine. However, okay, he's a Roman. So what he means by he doesn't drink a lot of wine, his habit was not to drink any more than 3 times of the wine at dinner time. So he's really cutting back quite a bit there. So so typically, his day, if you're wanting to know, is that after dinner, he went to a couch to his study. And then he remained to the late hours of the night. Then he tried to sleep 7 hours a day, but really woke up every 2 hours, and he just wander around. And then he'd had somebody read to him so he can go back to sleep. So usually had a broken sleep. He liked to be clean shaven. He had clear, bright eyes, and many people liken it to having divine power. His teeth were widely apart, small and ill-kept. His hair was tight and curly. I'm reading descriptions from ancient times, by the way. His eyebrows were tightly knit. His complexion was between dark and fair. He was short of stature. How tall was he? 5 feet 9 inches in height. So yeah, not too bad, right? He did suffer from illness, various diseases, but somehow throughout his life he somehow survived. He did write philosophy, exhortation to philosophy, and other things. He's interested in Greek studies, so that's kind of a little bit about him, right? So kind of cool. Let's keep on going. See the next image. Oh, that showed up. Okay, so we'll kind of put that. We'll put that down temporarily. That's a good one, though. I'm surprised it's still there. Okay, so Octavian then went on an inspection tour of the outposts in Gaul. He took his stepson Tiberius with him, and then becomes. I have to mention this. Comes the first settlement of 27 BCE. Octavian made a tactical risk by offering to relinquish all his military power over Egypt and to offer all his civic power back to the Senate, knowing that such actions would panic the people, fearing that they would not be fairly represented before an often power-hungry, aristocratic governing body. So he said, I'm going to give it all up. People are going, wait, no, we can't have that. See where we're going, you know? So what happens is riots were in the streets of Rome. The Senate realized they had to play ball with Octavian, and so they came to an agreement. Oh, no, wait a second. It looks like we're in trouble. So the Senate gave Octavian a new title. He was to be called, 27 BCE, Augustus Caesar from now on. The title was not a political one in designation, but a religious one. The title means one who is majestic, or the increaser, or even the venerable. The title was often used before in connection to the lares, the Roman, of course, household gods, and to honor them and of course the benefits hopefully bestowed upon the family. Now Augustus, who is now, takes this title on as a living family member, charged with benefiting his Roman family as their father. He is smart. Next, they gave him the power of Princeps, which, of course, meaning that he was the first citizen of the state and the representative of the people before the Senate. Wait, Pompey had it a little shortly. Remember that. Go back to Julius Caesar. He said, you're trying to destroy the Republic. And he says, I am the Republic, watch out. Well, now what's happening is the Senate is just giving him this power. Julius Caesar created the precedent, and Augustus says, oh, you're going to give that to me? How nice. You guys are so weak. I have you, right? He's a very, very clever politician, right? You can see this, right? So he said, yeah, you can call me Augustus. And yes, I'm the representative. So I am now the embodiment of the will of the people before the Senate. Yeah, sure, I'll do that. So next, what happens? Of course, the Senate went a step further, awarding him the right to wear the civic crown of the laurel and oak, right? And then the Romans declared Augustus as Savior. Yes. So what happens is, of course, because he defeats the enemies, he ended the Civil War, he brought stability and peace once again, and was now focused upon restoring, of course, restoring the Republic. Yeah, he's going to restore it all right. So how could a mere mortal accomplish this? At this time, Horus proclaimed, "You winged son," Hermes, Mercury, "of benign Maya, if changing your form, you assume on earth the guise of man, right ready to be called the avenger of Caesar, late may you return to the skies, and long may you be pleased to dwell amid Quirinius's folk, and may no untimely gale waft you from us angered at our sins. Here rather you may love glorious triumphs, the name of Father and chief Princeps, nor suffer the Medes to ride on their raids unpunished, while you are our leader, O Caesar." Wow. So while Augustus was being venerated as of course, Savior, he's also declared as Son of God, the August one, right? Because, of course, obviously Julius Caesar there, and the plebeians and commoners and everybody else is declaring his praises. He's saving us. He's saving the Republic against this greedy Senate. Now, as of course the Imperial Cult started to spread to the east in many places, already many leaders were viewed as gaining divinity. And so Octavian actually was already being worshipped as a god in Pergamum. We're already seeing this now with Herod. Thank you, Herod, so much. And of course, even at Lesbos and Cyprus, Herod the Great, we talked about him, but also in Egypt, he was declared as God of gods. With that said, Augustus within Rome and Italy avoided the trappings of being honored as a god. He kind of avoided it because he knew, look what happened to adopted dad. I'm not going to do that. So what happens is that so he would not accept that kind of veneration there, but he gladly accepted it elsewhere. In fact, he even said, "Call me Lord" is something insulting. I'm just like you. Well, he's doing it there, right? So what happens now is that here we go. So what happens is Marcellus, the husband of Octavian's daughter, Julia, died. And so Marcellus, of course, obviously, so that this left Octavian without an obvious male to the power. So because obviously, poor, so what happens is his friend Agrippa was the only man who could maintain the loyalty of the army as a successor. Agrippa had already had superior status to the elected proconsuls of Rome, and so Agrippa now becomes his daughter's husband. Got it? So kind of alliances, and so we're in time for a second settlement. Another one, yeah, the settlement of 23 BCE. What's happening now? Augustus decided it was time to renounce, he says, the consulship. I don't want to be, I'm not going to be consul anymore. I'm giving it up. And so they gave him the power of tribune, which of course is the embodiment of, again, the will of the people, the tribunes, to the plebeian councils. So there you have it, just switching one power for the other. Whereby, of course, with the power of tribune, he had the authority to convene the Senate. He had the ability to address the public assembly. He had the ability to initiate business wherever he wished to go. With the power of tribune, he also held the highest veto power, and so could veto anything he disagreed with, both in the Senate and the assembly. So what do you think? He gave up the consul, which, by the way, there's two vetoes against each other, and he got the tribune who could just veto them all. Well, that takes care of that. I love the way he gives up his powers. Isn't that great? They just, then of course, the second settlement, Augustus is declared as Imperator. And that title stays. That is the rudiments for the idea of emperor. He is now, hey, guess what? He's commander in chief of the military. He's head of it all. Well, but he's no longer consul. Yeah. Yes, he has all the power, but he has this. He has the power. So of course you can see where we're going with this one too. Okay, so what happens now is the plebeians want their man now. Virgil now decides that there needs to be a great epic. You have the Iliad, you have the Odyssey. Rome needs this great epic that's called the Aeneid. And we talked about the summary in the beginning of this talk, so I won't go into what it is. But there is a scene I want to talk about. So basically, Augustus is getting now mythology connected to him. But there's a great scene, I have to tell you. Aeneas seeks his father's advice in the underworld of Elysium, place where the virtuous souls go. And so Anchises tells his son that as follows about the future. So I'm going to actually read the Aeneid. You guys ready? Listen up. So he tells Aeneas, and of course, remember Aeneas is related to Julius Caesar and then Augustus, right? He says, now fix your sight and stand intent to see your Roman race and Julian progeny. The mighty Caesar waits his vital hour, impatient for the world, and grasps his promised power. But next, behold, the youth of form divine, Caesar himself, exalted in his line. Augustus, promised oft and long foretold, sent to the realm that Saturn ruled of old, born to restore a better age of gold. And there you have it. He is a savior. He is of the Republic. They're writing epics. And what's happening? The Roman Empire is happening, right? So that's exactly what happened. So slowly but surely, of course, sacred games are declared. And now what happens, of course, social legislation is passed in 19 BCE. Caesar Augustus encouraged the Roman Senate to pass laws for marriage, providing penalties for adultery, except for, of course, himself, discouraged extravagant spending, and yet at the same time. Now, meanwhile, Agrippa and Julia, of course, his daughter had two sons, one born in 20 BCE, the other in 18 BCE. Augustus, eager to have male heirs to whom he could pass his power, adopted these two sons and renamed them Gaius Caesar and Lucius Caesar. And so now we have, of course, again, I said mentioned secular games. I do have some wonderful poetry, but I don't have time to read that. But just know it's there. Then what happens in July 4th, 13 BCE, the Senate commissioned an altar dedicated to the Augustan peace. Let's take a look. That's Julia. Hi, Julia. Yeah, that's so Julia. How do I put this? So Julia and Agrippa are married. I'm going to say that, and they will be. I guess I'll follow the story a little bit. But what happens is Agrippa does, he does die, but Julia gets involved in more of a hedonistic kind of lifestyle, and so he has to exile her off to an island, and eventually she gets herself unalived for her deeds. So just telling you, so it's a very sad fate. There are entire books written about her. I just want to mention that. Let's go to the next one. Nice hair, though, right? Okay, so this is on July 4th, 13 BC, the Senate commissioned an altar of Augustan peace. It was to be dedicated in honor of this new age of gold, ushered in by Caesar Augustus. The rectangular shaped altar was located on the northern outskirts of Rome, and was completed by the time of January 30th, 9 BCE. The Areopagus, which is essentially a rhetorical billboard established through art that the old-time religion of Rome was good enough for Augustus, it should be good enough for everybody else. So Augustus created an empire out of the Republic. He, of course, did so by making himself appear as traditional as ever, and that included traditional Roman religious fixtures thrown into the mix. Upon the altar, we see the story of Romulus and Remus, beginning with Rhea Silvia's affair with Mars, that got her pregnant with them in the first place. Next, we see the twins taken off in a box in the discovery by the wolf called Lupa, which is, by the way, the same word for prostitute. Plutarch said it was a woodpecker. Next, the shepherd Faustulus is shown. Another foundation legend finds its way on his tomb also. Let's go to some other images here. Oh, there we have it. That right here is Agrippa as Pontifex Maximus. I go to the next image. You got some pretty good images here, right? I like this. This is Tellus, the Mother Earth, with her fat brats, with fruits and poppies behind her, and the goddess Roma. You can see her there too. By the way, I kind of skipped it, but don't worry about it. Augustus is actually carved, hanging around just the senators and their families who are dressed like the emperor. He just kind of blends in because he's the every guy. He's the person of the people. People love him. And yet he's dismantled the entire republic single-handedly. Wow, what talent is this? Okay, let's go to the next image. That's a great image. I love that. Go to the next one. I think I have some poppies. Yeah, there they are. Well done, by the way. Next image. There's another. Oh, I love this. Wow, and the sea creature there. Next image. All from the altar. So what happens is that later on, nearby the area piece, when he dies in 14 CE, what he does is he actually has, and he writes his entire life story. His entire life story called the Res Gestae, which, by the way, I have quoted throughout my entire work. So a lot of this was firsthand from him. I this, I that. And I've been here. This is in Ankara, Turkey. So what happened is they located this by the altar piece in Rome on two columns. And then what happened is that they reproduced it everywhere, all over the place. And so three of these inscriptions have survived. The most extent is here in Ankara. Let's go to the next image. It's pretty extensive. I mean, it's his whole life written by him. Let's go to the next image. So what happens is he left his whole record there. Okay, so what happens is Agrippa dies at the age of 51, who was the Pontifex Maximus, because he had his buddy, his pal, as Pontifex Maximus. So who is going to take the title of Pontifex Maximus now? Of course, Augustus. So now he is officially the head of the Roman religion, in charge, and that's him dressed as the Pontifex Maximus. He has his head covered and everything else. This happens in 12 BCE, and so he officially and permanently takes this position, and ever after that, every Roman emperor is head of the Roman religion as a result of that. So that means that Augustus has what? He has ultimate religious power. He has ultimate public power before the people as Princeps, and he has ultimate military power as Imperator. That's what makes a Roman emperor a Roman emperor. And of course, so there you have it. Looking pretty magnificent there. There's a few sad things that do happen in nine. So there are a few sad things. I mean, hello, Julia, which is a whole other topic. But there's a few festive things as well. Let's go to the next image. Yes, they build the Forum of Augustus. His reason for building the Forum was to increase in number of people and of cases of law, which seemed to call for a third forum since two were no longer adequate. So he built this. He also had a temple of Apollo there. Let's go to the next image. Yeah, there's the layout. That's pretty cool. Go to the next image. So he divided the area of the city into regions and wards, arranging that the former should be under the charge of magistrates. He also created guards against fires. And he devised a system of stations of night watchmen and what we understand as fire departments for the city. And you are looking at one of the fire departments that is in Rome, and it's underground right now, and you can visit the old fire station. So he also made guides that buildings can only be a certain size. And so in many cases, he also ordained that buildings should be made out of brick as opposed to wood. Because in the old days, if there's a fire and you have a tenement building, their idea is to isolate the fire. So that means if your next door neighbor, his place is on fire, the firemen are not heading for his place to take the fire out. They're heading to your building to demolish it and surround it and isolate it. So maybe we should go to brick. And so you have the stories of how things went from brick to marble. Of course, he lavished that on. Next one. So this is his son. He becomes adopted son. But this is, of course, Tiberius Caesar. You can see there he's got the bare feet. So this is obviously taken after his death and apotheosis. But I want you to see that. But actually, what happens is that Augustus wants everybody but Tiberius to be the next in line. And Tiberius, because he's not of his own blood, right? Remember, he's the older brother of from another person's husband, of his okay, of Livia. Does that make right? So he liked Drusus, and then Drusus dies, and he liked the other two boys, and they die, and all of a sudden, in the end, by default, we're stuck with Tiberius, and Tiberius is all, thanks a lot. Tiberius would put himself in exile at various times, but eventually, Tiberius, in fact, he made Tiberius adopt other people so they in turn could be the rulers instead. And they all died or got killed, or except for Germanicus. But you see the kind of mess that's going on there. Okay, so next image. So we'll take that down temporarily. And then I want to mention also there was a great defeat at the Battle of Teutoburg Forest. I won't talk too much about this in 9 CE. So the Roman Empire keeps extending, and it goes all the way to the Elbe River. And then all of a sudden, the Germans win the day, and 3 legions are destroyed. The 17th, the 18th, and 19th under Varus. And of course, one of the words of Augustus was, Quintilius Varus, give me back my legions. Of course, it's over. And so as a result of that, there's no more expansion in Germany at the Elbe. It's now the Rhine River. They're not going to go any further to the east. And so that kind of becomes the main idea. Now, I want to bring up one more thing, and that is, unfortunately, it is unfortunate. And this is the last thing before we get to his mausoleum. So we're almost done. So what happens is that the age of Augustus ushered in inherent contradictions under a peaceful guise. For people wondered whether they were living in a renewed Roman Republic or a Roman Empire. The definition, too immediate and close at home to really readily discern. A certain orator by the name of Titus Labienus Rabinius. How's that for a name? Titus Labienus Rabinius hazarded on the side of seeing his era as more of an empire than a republic, viewing the rights of the few, usurping the rights of the many, and seeing in Augustus a new monarch. Titus was tolerated at first, largely because when he got to the controversial parts of his speeches, he skipped over them whenever he presented them in public, typically adding that they could all read these parts after he was dead. Well, Titus was further infuriated when Augustus started to censor anonymous pamphlets criticizing himself and other leaders of the new regime, establishing penalties for writing anything against public officials. Titus desired freedom of expression, a liberty he believed was part of the republic, or at least the republic he once knew. But the reforms did not end there, for Titus was further horrified when Augustus proclaimed that it was even illegal to voice an opinion contrary to his regime. The penalty for transgressing these new laws of censorship was that either one or all one's life's works were to be burned at the stake. Seneca later on thought Augustus's law was a rather unusual way of inflicting punishment upon scholarship. This is, of course, obviously, as a result of this new legislation, Titus was brought to trial, found guilty by the Senate of literary treason, and all his life's works were sentenced to be burned at the stake. When Titus heard the verdict, he walled himself up in his ancestral mausoleum and he committed suicide. He told his friends before he left that he did not want to be cremated, for he didn't want what came about to his books to happen to him. Of course, Titus had the last word, sending a very clear message to Augustus about what he thought of his censorship program through his self-imposed martyrdom. By the way, if you're curious, later on, the Roman Emperor Caligula, of all, reversed this edict against the works of Titus in 37 CE. And you know what? He ordered that the remnants of all his works to be retrieved and restored. And the funny thing is, really funny, is that most of his works somehow survived. Those loyal to him taking personal risks to defy Augustus's orders at the time and hide them. If he's worth to give his life for it, it's worth protecting. As a result of all the controversy, the works of Titus Labienus Rabinius were more popular than ever, with many of his books becoming standard classroom reading according to Quintilian. Unfortunately, however, later on, when many of the emperors who are not good emperors, of course, he is not, but we're talking about after the time of the golden emperors of Nerva, good ones, and Trajan, Hadrian, Antonius, Pius, Hadrian, we get into the 3rd century and they start becoming really autocratic and really scary. Titus and his works were again destroyed. So we don't have them today. So, by the way, Titus Labienus Rabinius, I just like saying his name. Is that okay? Serves as an example of a historian who valued what he believed what was the historical truth over his own safety, not compromising his materials based upon his research, but boldly setting them down in hopes that posterity would vindicate him. And while so many around him were immersed in the rhetoric that they were now living in a revived republic, what he observed was an empire hiding behind all that pageantry. So bravely, Titus Labienus Rabinius called it as he saw it as a historian, with his writings burned because he could not compromise his convictions. But the dishonor and shame may have been too much to bear, perhaps one reason he took his life, but conversely, he may have already calculated that his suicide would actually preserve both his memory and his honor. For in reaction to his self-sacrifice, so many possessed his books, right? Now, you can imagine that such censorship just may have an effect upon contemporary historians. For what could and couldn't they say without drawing unwanted and potentially dangerous attention upon themselves? What could they do? The answer came in the form, during the time of Augustus, of another Roman historian. His name is Titus Livius Potavinus, also known as Livy. In fact, the key to success and survival in a cautious age was to be likewise as cautious, moderate in tone, neither flattering or praising anyone too much, or making any even too sensational ideas come to the forefront, avoiding extra glosses, too much rhetorical displays, and fanciful stories. No. So Livy sought to be fair without superfluous commentary. As for Rome, was it a republic or empire, according to Livy, who's contemporaneous to Titus Livius Rabinius, who, of course, say what happened to him? Was it a republic or an empire? There you have an interesting dilemma. For Livy knew Augustus really well. In fact, Augustus paid him patronage, and he was very close to the palace in living quarters. And had his own family too. And so would try his best to provide the official line. So to speak, because he's actually talking right from the imperial mansion itself. Okay, so, and what history did Livy attempt? But nothing less than the entire history of Rome. Livy's cautiousness paid off. For already following the publication of his very first book of his collection, he was an immediate success. Livy extolled the virtues of the old republic, where courage and resilience were balanced by self-restraint, frugality, discipline, and a respect for order. Livy did indeed showcase the corruption of the later age, but he left room for a new Rome to develop based upon the virtues of the old, although not articulating much in the way of specifics. In this sense, Augustus was simply restoring the way of old through his reforms. And so, because of his keen insight on how far to proceed as a historian during an age where every action became more and more monitored, especially amongst the senatorial class and leading citizens, Livy painted a portrait of Augustus as the restorer of the republic. For Livy, it was best to write a qualified truth that would survive him, and so instruct others to follow examples of good rather than bad men, than to be overt about what he believed and have his works go by the way of Titus Livius Rabinius. So who would you be? They both had families. What would you do? Would you speak your mind and say what it is and risk everything and lose everything during a regime that's working against your freedoms? Or would you try to write something that still gave the gist of what's going on, but careful enough so that those works could survive? Who would you be? Titus Rabinius, would you be, or a Livy? It's just something to think about. Let's close, right? Let's go to the next image. So, of course, we have the next image here. We have, of course, the tomb of Augustus. I've been here, of course. It's pretty monumental. It's a gigantic circular tomb built in honor. It had used blind arches to support it. And you can see also, it looks like a kind of a giant mountain. It's like almost like a ziggurat with a god on top of the mountain, that being obviously Caesar. But yes, So this is very much a Haroon. The tomb is dedicated to that of a hero. So he dies. Augustus dies, but he creates a precedent that will continue with the next emperor. You see what happens is when Augustus, next image, this is the way his tomb looks like today. There's still a little bit left, go to the next image. This is now obviously he's dead because he has bare feet there. If you're in a statue and you have bare feet, and you're an emperor, you're dead, because the dead have the bare feet. So there you have it. And you can see right there a Cupid. That's maybe a hearkening to the connection with Venus. So there you have that. Very much a divine figure. You see, Augustus is then declared a god. He's no longer son of God. He is now Augustus the god officially. So who becomes son of God? Tiberius Caesar. So next emperor now becomes son of God, and next becomes savior, and all those titles and ideas now pass to the next emperor. And to the next one too, but Caligula wanted to be a god now. And so he loses everything. So, he actually took the statues of the gods and in Rome, gods and goddesses, and he put his own face on it, and then he just added a little bit more hair for the goddesses. So, and he tried to take the image of Zeus, Olympus, and bring it to Rome. It is said that Zeus laughed, the statue laughed when Caligula got himself killed. And then of course Claudius is after that, and Claudius didn't even want to become an emperor. We're really gonna restore the republic in this one, right? It's really going to happen. And a bunch of soldiers saluted the bumbling Claudius as he's hiding in the palace, thinking he's going to get his death blow. They pull aside the curtain. He's ready for the death knell, and they go, "Hey!" They honor him Caesar. So Claudius now becomes son of God, and he takes on all those titles: Princeps, Pontifex Maximus, as well as Imperator. Hey, he does some good things. He helps with the bureaucracy. Very efficient. He's the one who actually took Britain. He's the one who actually did it. Caligula before him had people all gather to take Britain, and then he ordered them to take the spoils of the god of the sea, and they all collected seashells in their helmets. But anyway, so Claudius did it. So he becomes Claudius the god when he dies and dedicated a temple. Does that make sense? And so the imperial cult continues on and on and on, emperor after emperor. If you're a bad emperor, you're not a son of God, and you're not a god in the end. Although I love one saying by Vespasian. He was dying because he was a son of God. And as he's dying, his last words were, "I think I'm becoming a god." And so his transformation. So this happens. And the title Pontifex Maximus is also carried with it all the way through. And as I said at the beginning of the talk, one by one, these powers lose their effect, lose their potency. But the idea of head of the Roman religion does not. You ever ask a question, which is more powerful? Is it state power? State power was gone by the time of Septimius Severus. It was already gone by 202, 203. They gave up Princeps, so state power not. What about military power? Certainly that pervades. Well, yeah, the Imperator idea is still a powerful idea, but it's so overused when everybody's being declared as emperors during the 3rd century. It kind of loses its force. Now it turns out the most powerful title ends up to be a religious title, because you can always appeal to the fact that the God puts you in power. The gods put you in power. There's nowhere else to go. All right. Me and the gods, we're really close. And so people like Diocletian held on to that kind of power with fury. And then it gets kind of confusing because Pontifex Maximus is head of the Roman religion. And when Constantine gets it, he's like, "Oh, wait, what do I do? I'm a Christian." He's not quite a Christian because he's so Invictus, all powerful son. But eventually by his death, he's baptized on his deathbed. He becomes officially a Christian. But the problem is that when you get to Theodosius the first, is that you're Pontifex Maximus, but you are a Christian the whole time. You're a Christian. What are you going to do? And yet you can't be a Christian that's over pagans and other religions. And you can see where this goes. This goes into the fact that now Pontifex Maximus connects directly to the official Roman religion, and that will become Roman Catholicism. Got it. And then, of course, what happens in 476 is the Western Roman Empire falls, and you get the rest. How are we doing, right? So you have a legacy. What do you think of Augustus? So take down the image there. There he is. Did you guys learn a lot? Right? Quite a bit. So that is Augustus. That is the legacy of Augustus. So here we describe the end of the Republic, why it fell. And it turned out to be how it fell was by somebody who's claiming to restore the Republic. I hear the Imperial March kind of pounding through my mind, right? Are you seeing this, Emperor Palpatine? Are you seeing how this works? And the idea of, oh, I'm going to give up power, to the point of, as a result of that, he gets more power. Shrewd power politics. And one last bit, and that is you can also see the influence or the echoing of the imperial cult, even when it comes to the context of Christianity. And you can understand when Christians say that they worship the Son of God, you can understand how many Romans would say, but why is that a crucified sage who is Jewish from Galilee? Aren't you loyal to the Roman emperors? Because only the Roman emperors are Son of God, and only Roman emperors are Savior, and only them are the ones to restore us to a golden age. And you're claiming it's this carpenter or stonemason from Galilee. And you can see how this leads to these kinds of conversations, right? Because the imperial cult has deep roots and has quite an effect even there. But again, sometimes you could say it's semantics. Sometimes it's just the way people describe things. But there you have it, right? So that's Augustus, and that's his legacy. It's a mixed one because, unfortunately, another one last word I want to say is that the Senate wasn't a great option either. And it is corruption. And sometimes, unfortunately, people want to have security over fearing power plays and corruption. And Augustus gave them security, and they went with it. And look what happened. Thank you so much.